My name is Ava Morgan, and I am 29 years old. For the past year, I've been serving overseas with the U.S. Army, stationed in Kuwait after a long rotation in Afghanistan. People tell me I look strong. Broad shoulders, steady eyes, the kind of presence that makes strangers instinctively step aside in crowded hallways. But underneath the uniform, the medals, the neat bun that barely contains my curls, I'm still just a woman who believed in love, family, and the promise of home. Home. That word carried me through nights when sandstorms rattled the tents, when gunfire cracked too close for comfort, and when loneliness felt like another kind of enemy. For me, home wasn't just Texas, where I was born and raised. It was the thought of coming back to Ethan Parker, my fiancé, my anchor, my reason. Ethan and I met 5 years ago at a fundraiser for veteran scholarships. He was in his second year of law school, awkward in a suit 2 sizes too big, with sandy hair that never seemed to stay down. I liked that about him, his imperfections. I was already deep into my military career then, used to men who tried too hard to impress, all charm and no substance. But Ethan? He was different. He listened. He asked about my deployment without flinching, like he wasn't afraid of the parts of me shaped by war. When he asked me out for coffee, I said yes without hesitation. 2 years later, he proposed. A sunset picnic by the lake, a ring hidden in the basket, his voice shaking as he promised forever. I said yes again. And when I deployed last year, we agreed the distance would only make us stronger. The other person who kept me grounded was Rachel Adams, my best friend since we were 10 years old. We grew up next door to each other, shared everything from homework to heartbreaks, even had matching tattoos inked on our 18th birthdays. When I left for deployment, Rachel promised she'd look after Ethan, check in on him, make sure he didn't drown himself in work. She sent me pictures sometimes. Ethan at the law firm's holiday party, Ethan holding the dog we'd talked about adopting one day, Ethan smiling in ways that made my heart ache with longing. For 12 months, I clung to the belief that when I came home, I'd step back into a life waiting for me, a fiancé who loved me, a best friend who had my back, and a future finally free from the sand, sweat, and fear of combat. But life doesn't always honor promises. Sometimes, the people you trust most are the ones who twist the knife deepest. Before I take you deeper into my story, let me pause here to say something important. If you've been listening and this story already pulls at your heart, or if it resonates with you in any way, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you won't miss the rest of my journey. And drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. It means more than you know to share this with you. Now back to my return home. The day I left base for the last time, the sky was streaked in gold, the desert sun bleeding into twilight. I tucked my uniform shirt into my duffel, changed into jeans and a t-shirt, and boarded the military transport with one thought pounding in my chest. I'm finally going home. The flight from Kuwait to Dallas felt endless. Each layover was a cruel test of patience, each delay a barrier between me and Ethan. My fellow soldiers buzzed with their own excitement. Wives, children, parents waiting for them. I scrolled through old messages from Ethan, reread the one he'd sent on my birthday. 1 more year, Ava. 1 more year, and you'll be back in my arms. I can't wait to start forever with you. By the time my plane touched down in Dallas, my hands shook with anticipation. My parents wanted to meet me at the airport, but I had another plan. I wanted to surprise Ethan, walk through the door, unannounced, flowers in hand, and see his face light up. I wanted him to know I chose him before anyone else. I stopped at a small shop near the terminal and picked up a bouquet of sunflowers, his favorite. Bright, simple, honest. I added a card with one line, I'm home. Driving through the familiar streets of Dallas, my heart thumped like a drumline. Every stoplight, every corner brought me closer. I thought about Rachel too, how she'd scream when she saw me, how she'd probably cry and pull me into one of her bone-crushing hugs. The 3 of us would celebrate together, laugh over wine, maybe even start talking wedding dates again. Ethan's apartment building looked the same as when I left. Brick facade, ivy crawling stubbornly along the walls, a place that felt both ordinary and safe. My hands trembled as I fit the spare key into the lock. The door creaked open. At first, everything seemed normal. The living room was dim, the TV still humming from whatever he'd been watching. My boots tapped softly against the floor as I stepped inside, clutching the flowers like a lifeline. Then I heard it. Laughter. A woman's laughter. I froze, my stomach twisting into a knot. Ethan had told me he might have friends over sometimes, that Rachel often stopped by to keep him company. But there was something in that laugh, too intimate, too familiar, that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. I took one step forward, then another. The hallway light spilled from the bedroom, the door slightly ajar. My breath hitched, and then I saw them. Rachel's hair tangled against Ethan's chest. Ethan's hand resting on her bare back. Their faces flushed, their smiles wide, their bodies tangled in a way that erased any doubt. The flowers slipped from my hands, hitting the floor with a dull thud. Ethan looked up first. His eyes went wide, panic flooding his face. "Ava," he stammered, scrambling to pull the sheets over himself. Rachel turned her head, and for one agonizing moment, our eyes met. My best friend, the girl I'd trusted with my secrets, my fears, my love. She didn't even look guilty, just startled, like a child caught with her hand in the cookie jar. "Ava, wait." Ethan's voice cracked, but I didn't stay to hear his excuses. I turned, my chest burning, tears blurring my vision. The door slammed behind me as I stumbled into the night, my world collapsing in silence, except for the pounding of my own heart. I'd faced mortar fire, ambushes, nights where survival wasn't guaranteed. But nothing had prepared me for this. I don't remember how I made it down the stairwell. My boots pounded against the concrete, each step fueled by a storm I couldn't name. Rage, heartbreak, disbelief, they all tangled into one suffocating blur. By the time I burst through the front doors of Ethan's building, the night air hit me like a slap. Cold, sharp, merciless. I gulped it down, but the knot in my chest only tightened. The bouquet of sunflowers, the card that said I'm home, all of it had been left behind on his bedroom floor like props in a cruel joke. I walked fast, then faster, until I was nearly running toward my car. My hands shook as I fumbled for the keys. I could hear my own breathing, ragged and uneven, and beneath it, echoes of their laughter. That laugh, Rachel's laugh, was going to haunt me more than gunfire ever did. I was almost at the car when I heard my name. "Ava." I froze. Ethan's voice, desperate and cracked, carried across the lot. I turned and saw him jogging after me, barefoot, jeans hastily pulled on, hair a mess. He looked like guilt personified. I wanted to scream, to demand why, to unleash every curse I had ever learned. Instead, I clenched my fists at my sides and said nothing. "Ava, please, just let me explain." "Explain?" My voice came out sharper than I expected, edged with a steel I'd honed overseas. "Explain what, Ethan?" "That while I was halfway across the world fighting to stay alive, you were screwing my best friend in our bed." His face twisted, torn between shame and denial. It's not what you think." The absurdity of it made me laugh, a hollow, broken sound that tasted like blood in my mouth. "Don't insult me. I saw you. I saw both of you." Behind him, the building door creaked again. Rachel stepped out, wrapped in one of Ethan's shirts, her hair falling in waves around her face. She didn't look devastated or guilty or even sorry. She just looked irritated, like I was the inconvenience in this moment, not her betrayal. "Ava," she started, her tone maddeningly calm. "This isn't how I wanted you to find out." My body went cold, the fury burning deeper. "Find out? Find out what, Rachel?" "That my best friend is a snake who crawled into my fiancé's bed while I was gone." She rolled her eyes, actually rolled them, like I was overreacting. "You were gone a long time, Ava. You don't understand what it was like for him. For both of us." The word sliced through me sharper than any blade. My knees nearly buckled, but pride forced me to stand taller. Ethan reached for me, but I stepped back. "Don't touch me." He flinched, his hand dropping. "It just happened," he said, his voice trembling. We didn't plan it. We were both lonely. And one night, lonely. I cut him off, my voice rising. Do you have any idea what loneliness is, Ethan? Sleeping in a tent where bombs drop, so close you pray you wake up in the morning? Watching friends die, and wondering if you'll be next? And you dare stand here and tell me you were lonely? His face drained of color. Rachel crossed her arms, lips pressed tight, but she still wouldn't look away. Don't do this here, she muttered. People are staring. Good. Let them stare. Let them see the woman who carried their flag overseas, who gave her blood and sweat for this country, now gutted not by war, but by betrayal at home. I opened my car door, slid inside, and slammed it shut before Ethan could say another word. He knocked on the window, his face twisted in panic. I didn't look at him. The engine roared to life, and I peeled out of the lot, leaving both of them in the rearview mirror where they belonged. But they didn't stay there. No matter how far I drove, their faces followed me. Rachel's casual shrug, Ethan's pleading eyes, the sheets twisted around them. It replayed over and over until I thought I might scream. I ended up at a gas station off the interstate, hands gripping the wheels so tight my knuckles turned white. I hadn't cried yet. Soldiers learn to hold it in, to lock the pain away until there's time. But tears burned behind my eyes, waiting. I sat there for nearly an hour, staring at nothing until my phone buzzed in the cup holder. Ethan's name lit up the screen. Call after call, then texts. Please, Ava. Let me explain. Don't do this. We can fix it. Fix it. The dam inside me finally broke. I screamed, a raw sound that ripped from my throat, and slammed my fist into the steering wheel. Then the tears came, hot and unrelenting, rolling down my cheeks until I couldn't breathe. When the sobs finally quieted, I wiped my face and drove to my parents' house. I didn't even call ahead. I just showed up at 2 a.m, duffel slung over my shoulder, uniform still wrinkled from the flight. My mom opened the door, startled but smiling, until she saw my face. Oh, honey, she whispered, pulling me into her arms. I broke again, clinging to her like I was 16 years old and had just lost my first love. But this wasn't teenage heartbreak. This was betrayal at its cruelest. For days, I barely left my old room. My mom brought me meals. My dad sat with me in silence. I tried to sleep, but nightmares came of war, of betrayal, of Rachel's laugh and Ethan's excuses merging into one endless torment. Friends texted, some asking if I was back, if I wanted to celebrate. I ignored them all. Word would spread eventually. Maybe Rachel would even spin the story herself. She always did like being the center of attention. 3 days in, Ethan showed up at my parents' house. I saw his car from the window and nearly didn't answer, but my dad's jaw tightened and he said, "You deal with this, Ava, or I will." I stepped outside. Ethan stood on the porch, holding flowers, the same kind I had bought for him. I wanted to laugh in his face. Instead, I said, "You have 2 minutes." He swallowed hard. I messed up. I know I did. But Ava, I love you. I still want to marry you. Rachel meant nothing. It was a mistake, a stupid mistake. A mistake. That word again. Do you call it a mistake when it happens over and over? I asked, my voice sharp. Because I know it wasn't just once, Ethan. How long? He hesitated. That was all the answer I needed. I stepped closer, so he could see the fury in my eyes. You don't get to beg for forgiveness. You don't get to stand here and pretend you didn't make a choice. You chose her. You chose betrayal. His face crumpled. Please, Ava, don't throw us away. I can't lose you. You already did, I said, and slammed the door in his face. Inside, I leaned against the wood, my chest heaving. My dad placed a hand on my shoulder, steady and silent. That night, lying awake in my childhood bed, I realized something. The war had taken pieces of me I could never get back. But Ethan and Rachel had taken something worse. They had stolen my trust, my belief in love, my sense of safety. And I wasn't going to let them walk away with it. No. If there's one thing the army taught me, it's strategy. And if there's one thing betrayal teaches you, it's that sometimes revenge isn't just deserved, it's necessary. They thought they broke me, but they had no idea what kind of fire they had lit. I didn't leave my parents' house for a week. The days blurred together, a loop of silence and shadows, the only breaks coming when my mom knocked gently to leave food at the door. Sometimes I ate, sometimes I didn't. Most times I just stared at the ceiling, tracing invisible scars across the plaster. War had taught me how to survive in the harshest conditions, but betrayal? No one gives you a manual for that. No sergeant screams in your face until you harden up. No commander hands you a mission and tells you where to aim. Betrayal is silent, creeping, the kind of wound that festers because it cuts straight through trust, straight through the parts of you that believed. At night, sleep was a stranger. I'd close my eyes, and the images would come. Ethan's hand on Rachel's back. Rachel's laugh curling through the air like smoke. The bouquet of sunflowers abandoned on the floor. Sometimes the scenes blurred with memories from Afghanistan, explosions, the smell of burning, the sound of someone screaming for a medic. The betrayals fused until I couldn't tell which hurt more, bullets or broken promises. I kept my phone off most of the time, but when I turned it on, the messages were there. Ethan's endless texts. Please answer. I'm sorry. I love you. Let's talk. Please don't give up on us. Rachel had only sent one. You'll understand someday. You were gone too long. He needed someone. My stomach twisted every time I read it. The arrogance. The sheer selfishness. She was supposed to be my sister in everything but blood, and she reduced my year of sacrifice to an inconvenience. By the 5th day, I finally left my room. My mom was sitting at the kitchen table, her Bible open, glasses perched low on her nose. She looked up, relief softening her features. You should eat, she said gently. I nodded and poured myself coffee. We sat in silence for a while, the steam curling between us. Then she reached across the table and touched my hand. You don't have to talk about it until you're ready. But when you are, we're here. The words cracked something inside me. I swallowed hard, trying to push the lump in my throat back down. I thought they loved me, I whispered. They don't know what love is, she said, firm now. They only know what's easy. And you, Ava, you've never been easy. You've always been strong. That scares people. Her words should have comforted me, but all I felt was rage simmering beneath my ribs. I left the table, grabbed my keys, and drove without a destination. The streets of Dallas looked both familiar and strange, like a movie I'd watched too many times but no longer cared about. I passed the coffee shop where Ethan and I had our first date. The park where Rachel and I spent summers sprawled on blankets, dreaming about the future. Each landmark was a knife, slicing deeper. I ended up at White Rock Lake, sitting on a bench overlooking the water. It was quiet except for the distant hum of traffic and the occasional bird. I tried to focus on the calm, but my thoughts were anything but. I remembered wiring money from base, so Ethan could cover rent when he was still in law school. I remembered sending Rachel care packages, scarves from Kuwait, little trinkets because I missed her. I remembered late night calls, fighting through bad connections, just to hear their voices. And all the while, they were betraying me. Together. I felt something shift inside me that day at the lake. The grief was still there, heavy and raw, but underneath it grew something sharper. A clarity I hadn't had since I walked into that apartment. They had taken enough from me. My trust. My love. My plans for the future. I wasn't going to let them walk away unscathed. I didn't know exactly what I would do yet. But I knew this. I wasn't going to fade quietly into the background while they played house with my stolen life. When I got back to my parents' house, I went straight to the garage. My duffel bag sat where I'd dropped it the night I returned, still packed with everything I'd carried from deployment. I opened it, pulling out uniforms, boots, medals, even the American flag folded neatly at the bottom. Each piece reminded me of who I was. A soldier. A survivor. A woman who had endured worse than this and come out standing. I sat on the cold concrete floor and stared at the flag in my lap. You don't get to break me, I whispered, not sure if I was talking to Ethan, to Rachel, or to myself. Maybe all three. The next day, I forced myself into routine. Morning runs around the neighborhood. Push-ups and sit-ups in the backyard. Cooking dinner with my mom. Normal things. Things that reminded me life still existed outside the chaos. But at night, I plotted. I thought about Rachel's PR job, how her image mattered more than anything. I thought about Ethan's budding career at the law firm, how fragile his reputation was in a field built on trust and respect. The Army had taught me patience, planning, strategy. You don't rush into an ambush. You wait, you study, you strike when the timing is perfect. So that's what I would do. But before I could plan revenge, I had to face the depth of what they'd done. I needed to know how long this had been happening. I needed the truth, no matter how much it hurt. I turned my phone back on late that night. Within minutes, Ethan called. Against my better judgment, I answered. His voice cracked with relief.
Ava.
Thank God. I've been going crazy. I didn't say anything. Just waited.
Please. Meet me.
Just once. Let me explain. Explain. Always that word. Where? I asked, my voice cold. We met the next afternoon at a diner we used to go to after church. He looked terrible, dark circles under his eyes, hair unkempt, suit wrinkled. He slid into the booth across from me, reaching for my hand, but I pulled it back. I don't want excuses, I said. I want the truth. How long? His eyes darted away. A few months. Don't lie to me. He swallowed. Almost a year. The words hit me like a bullet.
A year.
The entire time I'd been gone. Every letter, every care package, every phone call, they'd been lying to me while pretending to care. I leaned back, staring at him like he was a stranger. And you would have married me anyway? His face crumpled. I still love you, Ava. I swear I do. But Rachel, she was here. She understood things you couldn't. I slammed my fist on the table, the silverware rattling. Don't you dare tell me I couldn't understand. I sacrificed everything for us. I bled for this country, while you couldn't even keep your damn promises. The diner fell silent, eyes turning toward us, but I didn't care. Let them all hear. Let the world know what he'd done. I stood, throwing a few bills on the table for my untouched coffee. We're done, Ethan. You made sure of that. And you'll regret it. I promise you that. I walked out, my chest heaving, adrenaline pumping like I'd just walked off the battlefield.
Because, in a way, I had.
When I got home, I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. For the first time in days, I felt a spark of purpose. I started searching, digging, gathering threads. Ethan's firm had public records. Rachel's company had social media footprints. All of it was there, waiting to be used. And as the night stretched into morning, I felt something new take root inside me. Not just anger. Not just grief. Resolve. If war had taught me how to fight, then betrayal had just taught me why. The more I dug, the more the truth bled through the cracks. It wasn't just about Ethan and Rachel sleeping together.
No.
That would almost have been easier to stomach. Just lust, just weakness. What I found was so much deeper, so much uglier, that my anger began to feel less like an emotion and more like fuel in my veins. The first clue came through a message I hadn't expected. One of our mutual friends, Carrie, texted me late one night. She didn't know what had happened. I hadn't told her, hadn't told anyone outside my parents. But she'd written, saw Ethan and Rachel at the Chamber of Commerce gala last month. They looked like they owned the place. Are y'all planning the wedding yet? I stared at that message for a long time.
A gala.
Together. Smiling, parading, while I was still across the ocean. They hadn't just betrayed me in private. They'd made a public display of their closeness. And nobody thought twice about it. The next morning, I called Carrie. She was her usual chatty self, talking a mile a minute, until I cut her off. What exactly did you see? Well, she said slowly, they came together. They were on the arm all night. Everyone assumed you must have broken things off, Ava. I mean, why else would Ethan show up with Rachel? But I figured maybe you guys were still, working it out long distance. My stomach churned. Did they say that? That we'd broken things off? No, she admitted. But Ethan introduced her as well, not officially, but you could tell. They were, God, Ava, they were acting like a couple. I thanked her, ended the call, and sat in silence for a long time. So that was the game. Not just secrecy, but rewriting the story altogether. Erasing me. I opened my laptop again. I'd bookmarked Ethan's firm's website the night before, half out of habit, half out of spite. Now I scanned it more carefully. There he was, my fiancé, or rather, my ex, smiling in a tailored suit, listed as a junior partner. My chest tightened.
Partner.
Already? That wasn't supposed to happen yet. He told me before I left that it would take at least 5 years to even be considered. Yet here he was, less than 2 years in, already climbing faster than anyone I'd ever seen. I scrolled through the firm's press releases. That's when I saw it. A headline dated 4 months ago. Parker leads negotiation for landmark real estate deal. Real estate. The phrase punched me in the gut because I knew that deal. I'd been the one to send Ethan $20,000 from overseas for the down payment on what was supposed to be our first home together. He'd convinced me it was safer to put it in his account, that he'd handle the details while I was gone. And here it was under his name in glossy photos in quotes where he bragged about investing in the community. My money, my sacrifice, claimed as his own achievement. I clicked through photo after photo until my vision blurred with rage. And then in one of the group shots, I saw her, Rachel, standing next to Ethan, her hand brushing his arm, her smile brighter than I'd ever seen it. That was the moment something hardened inside me. It wasn't just betrayal of love. It was theft. It was erasure. It was them building a life on top of my bones and smiling while they did it. I shut the laptop before I threw it across the room. My breath came fast, shallow. My hands shook, not with weakness, but with the urge to act. For days after, I played detective. I combed through social media, finding tagged photos of Ethan and Rachel at charity events, at brunches, at dinners with people who used to be our friends. I saw Rachel wearing a necklace I'd sent her from Kabul, claiming in the caption it was a gift from someone special. I saw Ethan showing off the watch I'd bought him for his bar exam, thanking Rachel for believing in him. Every discovery was another nail in the coffin of the people I thought I knew. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was humiliated.
Played.
They had used me, both of them, while smiling to my face, while sending me empty words of loyalty. But humiliation doesn't last long when you've been trained for war. It transforms. It sharpens. And in me, it transformed into resolve. One night, I sat in the garage again, the flag spread out across my knees. I thought about the soldiers I'd served with, men and women who died before their time, who'd never get to come home, who'd never get the chance to be betrayed because their lives had been cut short. And here I was, alive, being handed a different kind of battle. I whispered into the quiet, "You took my love. You took my trust. You took my money. Now I'll take everything from you." That was the night I stopped being just Ava, the heartbroken fiancé. That was the night I became something else, something they didn't see coming. I started small, gathering, watching. Information is power, and I had patience on my side. I looked into Rachel's company, her bosses, her projects. I learned quickly that Rachel was walking a fine line. One scandal, one misstep, and her carefully curated image could crumble. Then I shifted to Ethan. He had leveraged not only my money, but my connections too. People I'd introduced him to at military fundraisers now listed him as their go-to attorney. He was using me even in my absence. But what made me angriest was realizing how intertwined they had become, how their lives weren't temporary. They were a foundation they were building their future on. A future stolen from me. I couldn't sleep anymore, but this time it wasn't because of nightmares. It was because my mind was alive with planning. Every betrayal they dealt me, I would return in kind. Not impulsively, not in blind rage, but carefully, methodically, like a soldier laying traps. One morning, my dad caught me scribbling notes in a notebook, arrows and circles connecting names and dates. He frowned but didn't ask questions. Instead, he said, "Whatever you're doing, make sure it's worth the fight." I looked up at him, and for the first time in weeks, I smiled. "It will be." I started reaching out, carefully, discreetly. An old army buddy, who now worked in cybersecurity, owed me a favor. He agreed to dig into Ethan's accounts, trace transactions, anything that might show where my money had gone. Another contact, a journalist I'd once helped with a military piece, hinted she'd be very interested in a story about hypocrisy in the legal world. I didn't give her details yet, but I would. And as each day passed, I felt myself growing stronger. Not healed. No, those wounds were too deep for quick healing. But focused. Alive in a way grief had smothered. The anger was still there, sharp and burning, but now it had direction. I wasn't going to beg Ethan for closure. I wasn't going to plead with Rachel for an apology. They didn't deserve my tears anymore. What they deserved was to watch everything they'd built on my back collapse around them. What they deserved was to learn that betrayal doesn't end when the victim walks away. Sometimes, betrayal is just the beginning of a reckoning. And I was ready to deliver it. The first move had to be quiet. A soldier never charges in blind. You feel the ground first, test the perimeter, look for where the enemy is weakest. Ethan and Rachel weren't going anywhere. They were bold, yes, but not stupid enough to leave town. That gave me time. The first report came back from Marcus, my old army buddy, who now worked in cybersecurity. He sent me an encrypted file late at night, along with a simple message: "You were right." My hands shook as I opened it. Page after page of bank transactions, neatly laid out, with highlights showing the trails of money. There it was, my $20,000 wired straight into Ethan's account, only to disappear into business investments that linked back to his firm. But what stopped me cold was what came next. Rachel's name. Again and again. Not just as a spender, but as a co-signer. Ethan had used my money to fund joint ventures with her, tying them together financially long before they were brave enough to flaunt it socially. I leaned back in my chair, biting the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood. They hadn't just betrayed me emotionally. They'd built an empire on my sacrifice. I wanted to smash something, to scream. Instead, I closed the file, took a deep breath, and whispered, "Okay, now I have you." I spent the next 2 days in almost complete silence, working from my room, mapping everything out. Ethan's firm, Rachel's job, their shared accounts, their social circle. My notebook was filling with lines and arrows, looking less like a diary and more like a war map. When the pieces finally aligned, I made my first call. It was to the journalist Amanda Reyes, who had once leaned on me for military insight. She specialized in corruption stories, the kind that could turn a small-town hero into tomorrow's headline villain. "I have something for you," I said when she picked up. Her tone sharpened immediately. "You sound serious. Serious enough that it could take down a lawyer and a city council darling in one sweep."
Who?
"You'll know soon. But first, you'll need proof." Amanda chuckled softly. "I don't run on gossip, Ava. I need receipts." "Good," I said, my voice steady. "Because I have them." We agreed to meet in 2 days, and I hung up, staring at the phone long after the call ended. My heart was racing, not from fear, but from adrenaline. I was making the first strike. In the meantime, I tested another angle. I knew Rachel thrived on attention. She lived for her social media presence, curating every post as if she were auditioning for the role of perfect small-town sweetheart. All smiles, charity runs, and wine nights with the girls. So, I set up a new account, anonymous, faceless. A soldier knows how to use camouflage. I followed her, liked her posts, waited. Then slowly I began commenting innocuous things at first, compliments on her outfits, heart emojis. She responded quickly, like she always had, hungry for validation. Then I shifted. "Does Ethan know you wore that necklace already with someone else?" It was just one comment, buried under 50 others. But I watched as she deleted it within minutes. The next day, I left another. "Beautiful dress. Didn't Ava buy you that?" Again, gone in minutes. By the third one, "Funny how you always smile bigger when Ethan's around," she blocked the account. I smiled.
Good.
She was rattled. Small cracks would grow into bigger ones. 2 days later, I met Amanda at a coffee shop out of town. I handed her the encrypted file Marcus had pulled, along with screenshots of social media posts, event photos, and every shred of evidence I had connecting Ethan and Rachel's rise to my money. Amanda flipped through the pages, her eyebrows climbing higher with every turn. This is damning. If even half of this checks out, you're looking at fraud, misuse of funds, conflict of interest. Will it ruin them? I asked. She glanced up at me, studying my face.
It'll do more than that.
It'll destroy their reputations. But I need to be careful. If I run it too soon, they'll have time to spin it. I need the right timing. Then time it, I said firmly. I'll give you more if I find it. For the first time, Amanda smiled. You're not just handing me a story. You're planning a takedown. I met her gaze steadily. They planned mine first. When I left that coffee shop, I felt lighter, almost giddy. The kind of adrenaline rush you get right before battle, when you know the first shot has been fired but the war is still yours to win. That night, I drove past Ethan's house. Our house. Or, at least, the house that was supposed to be ours. The porch light was on, casting a warm glow across the yard. Through the front window, I saw him and Rachel laughing together over a bottle of wine. She leaned across the table, touching his hand. For a moment, grief threatened to crack me open again. That should have been me. That was supposed to be our life. But then I remembered the file, the gala, the necklace around her throat that I'd once mailed with a handwritten note. And I remembered the cold, empty nights I'd spent overseas, dreaming of a man who had already replaced me. The grief hardened back into resolve. I rolled down the window and whispered into the night air. Enjoy it while you can. Because this was just the beginning. The next strike came quicker than even I expected. Marcus called me, urgency in his voice. You didn't tell me Ethan was funneling money into shell accounts. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? I traced part of your $20,000, and guess what? It didn't all go into real estate. Some of it vanished into offshore accounts. Cayman Islands. That's not something a junior lawyer should be playing with. I gripped the phone so tight my knuckles ached. Can you prove it? I already did. Sending you the files now. Ava, this isn't just betrayal. This is criminal. I closed my eyes, breathing slowly. Criminal. Perfect. When I opened them again, I felt sharper than I had in months. I called Amanda back, told her about the new discovery. She nearly choked on her words. Oh my God. Ava, if this is legit, this isn't just a story. It's a scandal that could end careers. Maybe even send someone to prison. Good, I said coldly. Let it. The days blurred together after that, a whirlwind of plotting and waiting. I moved like a ghost in my own hometown, invisible to Ethan and Rachel, yet weaving threads around them that would soon tighten into a noose. I didn't strike all at once.
No.
I wanted them nervous first. I wanted them to feel shadows breathing down their necks. I sent Ethan an anonymous letter, just one line typed in bold. How does it feel to build your empire on someone else's sacrifice? I sent Rachel a package, an old photo of the three of us together, me in uniform, them smiling on either side. Across the bottom, I'd scrawled, best friends forever? Neither of them responded publicly. But within a week, I noticed the shift. Rachel's posts slowed down. Ethan skipped one of his firm's networking events. The cracks were widening. And I wasn't done. Not even close. Because betrayal doesn't just demand revenge. It demands precision. And I was just getting started. The morning Amanda's piece went live felt like the moment before a thunderstorm. The air thick, everything holding its breath. I was somewhere between my parents' kitchen and the garage, hands wrapped around a mug that long ago stopped feeling warm. Marcus had sent a final packet overnight. Signed affidavits, transaction trails traced through shell corporations, screenshots of messages that tied Ethan and Rachel not just romantically, but financially and legally. Amanda had done what she did best. She took raw evidence and shaped it into a story that couldn't be ignored. When I clicked the link, the headline hit me first. Local lawyer, PR executive entangled in fraud allegations linked to deployed soldiers' funds. The piece opened with a short paragraph about loyalty, about betrayal, and then dropped the files like a grenade. It named names. It showed the transfers. It showed the gala photos with the smile that had been a lie. Amanda didn't sensationalize. She presented facts with the kind of cold, clinical clarity that felt more like an execution than a revelation. Within an hour, my phone was a chorus of ringing I hadn't felt in weeks. I silenced it. My hands were steady, shocking steadiness for the storm I'd just set loose. I went outside and stood on the porch, watching the world continue in ignorant bliss for a second before the ripples hit. Ethan called first. He tried to be measured. Pleading had the wrong ring to it, so he tried for reason instead. "Ava, this isn't," he stammered. "It is what it is," I said, because he needed to hear the simplest truth. There was a pause. "You don't understand the whole picture." "You hid the picture," I said. "You painted it someone else's colors." He told me his phone wouldn't stop buzzing with clients. Partners were calling. Some of his mentors had messages that read like condolences. Others, cold, brief, the beginnings of removing him from everything, came through in curt emails. Amanda's article had embedded documents. It had quotations from finance experts. It had a legal analyst who speculated about potential criminal charges. The world treats lawyers and PR people like they're made of thin glass. They look shiny until something knocks them off the pedestal, and you see the cracks. Rachel's posts evaporated like dew. She disabled comments, then deleted the post about the gala. Her employer issued a statement, pleased to report they had launched an internal review. That phrase, launched an internal review, meant nothing to me, but I knew the machine. It meant quiet investigations, boardrooms smelling of coffee and panic, people who once smiled for Instagram now passing around NDAs like lifeboats. By noon, the firm that employed Ethan issued a terse release. He was stepping aside from client work pending an independent review. The partner listed as interim had been in the public eye for all of 2 hours before reporters had already begun combing through his past to find any hint of impropriety. The ripple effect was immediate. Clients were asking for assurances, for audits, for transfers of files. A law practice lives by trust. Once trust cracks, everything destabilizes. The first time I saw Ethan in person after the article went up, it was at a small hearing where a judge signed an order to preserve accounts. He looked like a man who'd been clawed at in the night. He met my eyes across the courtroom, and, for a second, I saw the man I had loved, confused, scared, small. It didn't change the way my chest tightened. If anything, it reinforced the cold calculus I'd made months ago in my garage. This was not personal retribution. This was accountability. After the article, the friends I'd assumed would rally were scraps of paper, some folded neatly away, some left in the wind. Carrie texted and said she'd been blindsided. She didn't know their history. Another mutual friend messaged, asking if I was sure. The world wants a single narrative that fits neatly into its comfort. My story didn't fit, so people circled the edges. Only a few reached out with real concern. Mom, Dad, Marcus, Amanda. People who had been in the trenches with me, who knew the sharpness of truth and didn't flinch. Ethan's calls stopped being coherent pleas and turned into accusations. He tried to launch a counter-narrative, claims of hacking, of planting evidence, of slander. I let him talk. I let him weave what he wanted into the air. Then I let Amanda sink the rest with subpoenas and backup files. It was legal and ugly and satisfying. Amanda was brutal in her professionalism. She left no opening for them to spin. That's what reporters like her do. They watch reputations burn and then document the ashes so the public can see what built the pyre. Rachel called once. Her voice was a raw thing, thin as tissue. "Ava," she said. "Please." "I didn't mean." "You didn't mean to steal my home," I said. "You didn't mean to wear my things on nights you were with him. You didn't mean to erase me." There was a pause, and then silence. I could hear her breathing on the other end like she was trying to anchor herself in something steady. She didn't have the words to fix this. She didn't have the words at all. The PR fallout was immediate and delicious in a way that makes you feel guilty for enjoying the spectacle. Rachel's firm put her on leave. Sponsors pulled from events she'd spent months promoting, events that had relied on her curated authenticity. Authenticity is a commodity. Once you're discovered as selling a lie, buyers walk. The people who once celebrated her now declined interviews, posted generic sentiments about privacy, and then, in the worst kind of cowardice, started asking me privately whether I was sure. There was a board meeting at Ethan's firm the week after the piece. The partners sat like judges. They ran through memos and timelines and legal opinions, and, somewhere between a coffee-stained memo and the third counsel's sigh, they concluded what the public already suspected. Ethan's handling of funds was, at the very least, grossly negligent. He called me that night, voice cracking, not with anger, but with a small, lost despair. "Ava, help me." "You want help?" I asked. "Help me understand why you thought you could do this. Help me understand why you thought I'd never find out. Help me understand why you put your career above the woman who went overseas for you." He didn't have answers. He only had excuses. It surprised me that the collapse was more surgical than chaotic. There were no dramatic arrests in the square, no bellowing scenes on cable news. There were suits, hearings, the slow, clinical disrobing of icons. Rachel's followers slipped away. Ethan's board demanded an audit. Amanda's second piece, even more surgical than the first, included sworn statements from a disgruntled accountant who'd quietly expressed concerns months earlier. The firm's insurance lawyers started whispering about settlements. The world is a machine of paperwork and protocol. You pull one lever and the rest tick into place. Their fall was public, but not the way I'd wanted it to be. There was no satisfying scream, no moment when they crashed and I stood above them triumphant. Instead, there were quiet devastations. Ethan watched as clients requested meetings he was no longer welcome in. Rachel sat in a kitchen that used to be a studio for content creation and thumbed through messages from recruiters who now said they'd have to pass. Their friends unfollowed them on Instagram. Their mutual contacts texted terse condolences masked as professional distance. A confrontation finally happened on a Wednesday afternoon in the lobby of Ethan's firm. I'd gone there not to gloat, but because Amanda needed some follow-up documents she could only get with a face-to-face that involved me signing copies. The lobby felt sterile. Marble floors, glass that reflected back not the worst of what anyone was, but the most ordinary. He caught my eye and walked over before I could turn the other way. "You did this," he said, voice low. It wasn't accusatory so much as bewildered, as if the world had rearranged itself and he was trying to locate gravity. "Yes," I said. "I did." "You destroyed us," he said. "No," I corrected him. "You did." He searched my face for the woman he'd proposed to at the lake. Maybe he wanted to find the girl who'd laughed at his awkward jokes, the girl who'd believed in a future with him. If he found her, he didn't show it. There was only the hollow where the person he'd known used to live. "Please," he said, the syllable carrying the kind of pleading that sounded like a confession. "I can fix this." "You can try," I said, "but some things you can't stitch back together. You used my trust like currency. You invested it. You lied." The rest, the legal repercussions, the charges, were already in motion. I'd done more than hurt them. I'd exposed them. That was the point. As he walked away, shoulders sagging the size of a man who'd become someone else overnight, I felt an odd, complicated emptiness. Watching them fall had not eradicated the hollow left by betrayal. If anything, it magnified it. Revenge, I learned, is rarely a clean victory. It's a long, messy accounting. When the dust settled enough for me to breathe, I didn't go home to celebrate. I drove to a small community center downtown, where a veteran support group met on Thursday nights. I'd volunteered there before I enlisted. The room smelled like stale coffee and hope. The people there greeted me with warm, puzzled smiles, and for the first time in months, I let them in close, not with the war stories this time, but with the truth that sometimes the worst battles aren't fought overseas. They listened. They didn't offer solutions. They offered presence. I'd secured the evidence, handed it to those who could make it matter, and watched as the people who'd betrayed me were stripped of their facades. Justice, measured in paperwork and reputational loss, had been done. But I'd expected a different alchemy, less hollowness, more triumph. The sensation I carried with me instead was a complicated relief. The weight of deceit lifted, replaced by a curious ache that reminded me I was still human. That night, after the group dispersed and the fluorescent lights hummed down to a dull glow, I walked outside into the cool of Dallas evening. The city pulsed, unaware and indifferent and beautiful in its resilience. I'd been broken, yes. Betrayed, yes. But not defeated. The war had taught me how to survive. Betrayal had taught me how to fight with different weapons. As I stood there under a street lamp, I folded my hands, felt the roughness of the scar tissue where metal had once kissed my skin, and whispered to the air, "This is done." It was not a celebration. It was an ending. And endings, I had learned, give you a choice, to rebuild or to burn. I had already chosen. The dust should have settled, but it didn't. Betrayal doesn't evaporate cleanly. It lingers like smoke after a fire, clinging to everything you touch. I thought exposing Ethan and Rachel would give me peace, that watching their worlds collapse would fill the hollow they'd carved inside me. Instead, I found myself restless, staring at ceilings at 3 a.m, listening to my own pulse like a war drum. The town talked. Of course it did. Whispers in grocery store aisles, stares in church pews, pity disguised as curiosity. I could hear them without anyone saying it directly. That's the soldier whose fiancé and best friend ruined her. That's the one who brought them down. Some voices carried admiration, others unease. Small towns thrive on stories, and I'd given them one they'd chew on for years. But while people whispered, Ethan and Rachel sank deeper. Ethan's firm cut him loose. Not officially fired. Lawyers never get fired, but he was disassociated pending legal review, which meant he wasn't welcome in the building, wasn't trusted with clients, wasn't anything but a liability. His name disappeared from the website overnight. Rachel's PR firm didn't wait as long. They suspended her indefinitely, the kind of suspension that meant they'd never bring her back. She tried to pivot to freelance, but no one wanted their brand tied to her face anymore. I heard through Carrie that Rachel was living on the edge of town in a rental with peeling paint, trying to keep a low profile. I should have been satisfied. 2 people who built their lives on my back had been dragged into the mud, exactly where they belonged. But the fire in me wasn't out. I didn't just want their fall, I wanted them to feel it. I wanted them to know that the woman they thought they could break was the one who broke them instead. One evening, I got the chance. It was at the grocery store. Ironic how betrayals and confrontations end up happening in the most ordinary places. I turned down the bread aisle, and there she was, Rachel. No makeup, hair pulled into a careless knot, sunglasses even though it was nearly dusk outside.
She froze when she saw me.
For a second, it was like we were back in high school, 2 girls caught passing notes in class, the air thick with unsaid things. Then she lowered her sunglasses, and her eyes met mine. "Ava," she said, her voice small. I didn't move. "Rachel." She glanced around, like maybe she could slip away unnoticed. But the aisle was narrow, and I wasn't moving. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," she blurted out. I laughed, sharp and humorless. "You didn't mean to sleep with my fiancé? You didn't mean to take my money and build your career on it? You didn't mean to wear the necklace I gave you while smiling for cameras at the gala?" Her face crumpled. "It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that." I cut her off. My voice was calm, almost too calm. "You thought I'd be gone long enough for you to slide into my life. And you were right. For a while. But I came back." Tears welled in her eyes. She looked fragile, weak in a way I'd never seen her before. Part of me wanted to feel pity. But pity is a luxury, and she hadn't earned it. "I lost everything," she whispered. "You've already taken everything from me." "No," I said, stepping closer until there were only inches between us. "I didn't take anything. You lost it yourself when you chose him. When you chose betrayal over loyalty. Don't you dare make me responsible for the ashes you're holding." Her lip trembled. She didn't answer. She turned, shoved past me, and left the bread aisle without looking back. I stood there, hands gripping the cart, heart pounding in my chest. For the first time, I didn't feel hollow. I felt sharp. That night, Ethan showed up at my parents' house. I was on the porch, sipping cold coffee, when I heard his car pull into the driveway. He got out, looking thinner than I remembered, his suit wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot. "Ava," he said, voice breaking. "Please, we need to talk." "There's nothing left to say," I replied. "Yes, there is," he snapped, desperation making his voice crack.
"You don't understand.
"I made mistakes, but I still love you." My laugh cut through the night like a knife. "Love? You don't get to use that word anymore. You loved what I could give you. You loved how easy it was to take from me. You never loved me." He stepped closer, eyes frantic. "I did. I do." She meant nothing. "Then you threw away everything for nothing," I said coldly. "That's on you." For a moment, his face twisted into anger. "You ruined me," he hissed. "You could have walked away, but you had to scorch the earth." I stood, staring him down.
"No, Ethan."
"You ruined yourself. All I did was shine a light on it." He looked at me then, not with anger, not with love, but with something darker. The recognition of a man who realized he had lost not just a battle, but a war. He turned and stormed back to his car, slamming the door so hard the porch shook. As his headlights disappeared down the road, I sat back down and let out a long, shaky breath. That was the last time I ever saw him. The aftermath was quieter, slower, but no less satisfying. Ethan left town a few weeks later. No one knew exactly where. Some said Houston. Others whispered he was trying to start fresh in New York. Rachel stayed, but she was a ghost. I'd see her sometimes, slipping into stores at odd hours, avoiding eye contact. She no longer looked like the polished, smiling woman who used to light up every room. She looked like someone trying to survive in the ruins of a life she'd once stolen. I focused on myself. Therapy. The veterans group. Rebuilding the parts of me that had been neglected while I was too busy fighting wars, both overseas and at home. But one thing never left me. The knowledge that I'd taken control back. They hadn't broken me. They'd underestimated me. And when they thought I'd be their victim, I became their reckoning instead. Months later, Amanda's third article came out, not about Ethan or Rachel, but about me. She'd asked permission to tell my story. A soldier who came home to betrayal, who turned her pain into power, who refused to be erased. I almost said no. I didn't want to be a headline.
But then I realized it wasn't just about me anymore.
It was about every person who'd ever been betrayed and thought they had to suffer in silence. So I agreed. The article spread farther than I expected. Messages poured in from strangers across the country, other veterans, women who'd been cheated on, people who'd been stolen from or manipulated. They called me strong, brave, relentless. Words I'd stopped using for myself. One night, I read a message from a young woman in Ohio. I thought I'd never recover from what my fiancé did. But reading about you, it gives me hope. Thank you, I cried. Not out of grief, but out of something softer, something healing. Because for the first time, I realized my revenge had grown into something more. It had become survival, justice, even inspiration. The war inside me wasn't over. Maybe it never would be. But I was no longer fighting for scraps of closure. I was fighting for myself, for the woman who had endured, who had risen. Ethan and Rachel had thought they'd written the ending to my story. But I was still here, still standing, and this time, I was the one holding the pen. If you've been following Ava's journey and felt the fire, heartbreak, and strength in her story, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss the next story. And drop a comment below. Tell us where you're watching from.